Welcome once again, my friends. I'm Dave Champion. This is my co-host, Bill Carns. And together we are totally unprepared. What do you want to talk about today?
I don't know, man. It's been a rather boring week. Weather's looking all right.
About the weather?
Cooling down a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. But things kind of heated up yesterday.
A couple days back. Yeah.
Now, the whole town is talking. Now, for those of you who watch this coast to coast on YouTube, Bill and I live in the interesting town of Pahrump. And there was a little excitement here yesterday that
2 days ago.
2 days ago now?
2 days. Okay. It was Monday the 1st.
Okay. All of Pahrump is now talking about.
Okay. And it's not just Pahrump.
No, it's not.
Throughout the state. And as a matter of fact, I get notifications daily if my name ever comes up on anything on the internet. Oh. And there's stuff back on the East Coast. Keep in mind, yesterday I got a call from the Associated Press for comment. We'll get into all this.
All right. Yeah. So it's your story. You were there. I'm just the guy hearing about it later after the fact. So go ahead and tell them.
I was arrested on Monday the 1st by a Nye County Sheriff's deputy and charged with impersonating a police officer. It's actually impersonating a public officer. A bogus, trumped-up charge, which doesn't even meet the elements of the crime. I was pulled over for some traffic-related matter. I was in the Walmart parking lot with my girlfriend, and the guy that stops me, his name is Joe McGill.
Right.
Joseph McGill. He is a part-timer or reservist or something like that.
Reservist.
Yeah, okay. So we're having this discussion back and forth over the legalities of my vehicle and all that good stuff. And he asked me my basis of knowledge, and I told him, I said, my Metro P number is, and I rattled it off.
Okay, now let's go back a minute because the audience wasn't there. I've heard the story several times.
Okay.
He started to make some characterizations about the law.
He did.
Okay.
And I was, to the best of my ability, debating him on that.
Right. You were sharing your perspective.
Absolutely.
Okay. In which you referenced some of the NRSs.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Something the average citizen does not do.
Correct.
Okay. Usually when somebody references the NRSs in the middle of a traffic stop, they are either A, an attorney, B, a cop, or C, ex-cop.
Yes.
Okay. Now, so when you're sharing your perspective and in supporting your perspective, you're referencing the NRSs.
Correct.
He says to you
something along the lines of asking where I get my basis of knowledge. I told him my Metro P number, meaning Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, is da-da-da. So he said, whoa, hold on. What is this all about? Are you telling me you're a cop? And I said, no, I'm not. You cut me off. I used to be a cop for Las Vegas Metro. I resigned in May of '96. I left 19 years ago. Okay. So I used to be a cop. That's where I get my base of information. I've carried my knowledge on since then. Okay, so then we get into additional discussions. He then excuses himself from the car, goes back from my car, goes back to his car. Another plainclothes deputy pulls up after that. And
another plainclothes. Does this mean when he stopped you, he was plainclothes?
Yeah. Unmarked car, plainclothes, no uniform.
Okay,
yep.
All right.
So another of the same ilk comes up, and it's 5, 6, 7 minutes later, comes up, asks me to step out of the car, and places me under arrest for impersonating a police officer, to which I actually chuckle. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, let's talk about this for a second. How can you possibly draw that conclusion?
Hang on. Did you really say, hang on, let's talk about this? Because you know that got
Yes,
our friend Jim shot.
It did, didn't it?
It did, yes.
Yes, it did.
Hang on, let's talk about this. And he ended up getting shot.
I mean, he hooked me up. There was no problem there. There was no resisting, no force. There was no, I mean, he was, you know, not all hands on. It was fine. Mm-hmm. No problems with that at all. So anyhow, we're having this discussion back and forth, and he tells me, he says, you dropped a P number so that you could try to get out of a ticket, and the fact is you've done it before. The fact is this, the fact is that. He has his facts absolutely wrong. He's claiming that I dropped my P number to the other cop that had showed up as well.
For those of you who are not familiar, the P number
is a personnel number.
Is that Nevada
yes.
or just
It's just
Metro?
Las Vegas Metro. A P number is personnel number, and it's assigned. The very
like
first
in California,
person.
we used to call it just a serial number.
Serial number. Okay, well, the thing is with Las Vegas Metro, the way it works is everybody who has ever been employed with Las Vegas Metro gets a personnel number. And they're all consecutive. You know, if today was the assignment, somebody got hired and their number was 1312, the next day someone gets hired in a completely different division, they're 1313. The next person that gets hired, they're 1314. Doesn't matter where you're assigned. You could have been a cop, you could have been a dispatcher, you could have been clerical working in the records room, it doesn't matter.
And those numbers are never reassigned.
Never reassigned. They are yours for life. As a matter of fact,
if you went back to work for Metro tomorrow, what would your number be?
it would be the same one that it was when it was assigned to me in 1995.
Okay, so as far as Metro is concerned, working for them or not, it's a permanent identifier of William Carns.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I believe you could actually pull it up in the Scope computer and see that. I believe it's listed in there.
Okay.
I'm not for sure. I haven't seen it, but just from past knowledge from 20 years ago, I believe it should be there.
Okay.
So anyhow, he tells me, well, you told this officer last week that you were a cop and gave him your P number, and which is total fabrication. Last week, my girlfriend had gotten pulled over. She was close to the house, called me up. I went over there. I was not a subject of the stop. That particular detective, I had a hand in my pocket, and he seemed to get, in my idea, a little bit froggy by saying, hey, do me a favor, keep your hands out of your pockets where I can see them. Slowly took my hand out of my pocket, and I let him know something along the lines of, look, it's okay, I'm not a threat to you. I used to be a cop. It's all good. I'm not a threat. You know, I'm just trying to answer your questions here.
You were trying to allay any concerns he might
have. Absolutely. And I got to tell you, if I were a cop and somebody did that to me, it would put me at ease. So I'm trying to put myself in his position. So he's alleging I dropped a P number with this guy, which is a total fabrication. The interesting thing is I've read the arrest report now. I've seen the narrative that he wrote. And it is minus a tremendous amount of information that exonerates me. And it is added with what he says are facts, which in fact are completely fabricated in there. And on top of that, the elements to the crime of impersonating a public officer, it's if I remember right, it's a three-tiered system. You have to have done one of 3 or 4 things, and one of another 3 or 4 things, and one of 2 or 3 other things, which are not even in the articulation in the report.
Right. And I can tell you from having researched this particular issue years ago, and I'm not saying that this is what's in the Nevada statutes. I was doing my research in California, but I presume case law means the statutes are all fairly similar. You have to have identified you as a police officer and requested that somebody do something they would not otherwise have done, or prohibit them from doing something they would ordinarily do, or lastly, derive some benefit from claiming that you were an officer.
And that is the same in Nevada law.
Okay.
Yeah, I have looked it up.
Okay.
So the end run on this whole deal was...
by the way, I want to be clear, though, so the audience understands.
Yes.
If you meet somebody in a bar, you're sitting there having a beer, and he says, yeah, man, I'm a cop. And you go, oh, okay. And he finishes his beer, puts it down, and gets up, gets in his car, and drives away. Even if he's a trash collector, it's not impersonating a police officer.
No, it's not.
Okay, that's just bullshit.
And that's essentially that's essentially the level that we're at.
Okay.
So what it came down to, I was debating back and forth with this guy, and I think he developed a dislike for me. So he decided, you know, he's just going to jam me up. He's just going to jam me up. That, you know, I'm going to hook you up for this, and then I'm gonna blow up some other things based on vehicle registration garbage.
Okay.
So I got jammed up. I got booked about 3 o'clock. I got out of date. I billed out a whopping $400. Impersonating an officer or a public official in this state, it's a gross misdemeanor. It's not a felony charge. And I really, really look forward to the opportunity to get this out into the open. So
now,
yeah.
You, of course, first of all, being a gentleman, secondly, being the defendant in this matter, it is sort of incumbent upon you to sort of maintain the high road as you go through this.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not constrained by that.
Yeah, keep in mind, I still want to stay on the high road, but...
I'm not constrained by that.
It is your First Amendment.
Now, I've known you for what, close to 11 years?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. In that 11 years, I have never heard Bill Carns say that he is a police officer. I have never heard Bill Carns tell anyone else he is a police officer. And because we worked at one of the largest firearms schools in the country together, we know hundreds and hundreds of the same people. And they all many of them come back to Pahrump time and again. We've had social time with them together, separately, so forth. No one in 11 years has ever said, oh, Bill's a cop, right? Oh, where'd you get that idea? Bill said so. Not in 11 years. So, and this is subjective. It's just Dave speaking about his buddy, okay? There's very few guys that I know who have this man's integrity. So this is how I know that Joseph McGill is a fucking liar. And you know what, Joe? You're nothing but a big, fat pussy, okay? And what, are you gonna come after me now? Because I rubbed your ego the wrong way? Hey, what are you gonna get? Oh. Is it gonna be a speeding citation when I wasn't speeding, Joe? How about that lane change when I had my blinker on and you're gonna lie about it? What a fucking piece of shit you are. Go ahead.
I think they're bleeping this in the booth.
They are. Hey, how about that, Joe?
Oh, no, it's messed out. Now, here's the interesting thing. When we worked out at that school, we introduced ourselves. I introduced myself to tens of thousands of students, and part of my introduction was I am a former Las Vegas Metro police officer.
Yep.
And then I go through DOD employment and all that other good stuff. The sheriff's department out here knows I used to be with Las Vegas Metro. As a matter of fact, it was about 5 years ago. A little less than that. I was asked to be the very first citizen to ever sit in on the police shooting review board for the Nye County Sheriff's Office because of my background. The sheriff knew it, the assistant sheriff knew it, everybody in there knew it. It was published that I knew it. It was published in the local paper.
Yeah.
I have talked about it on this show, on my nationally syndicated radio show I used to have. Everybody knows at one point in time I used to be. And I've only ever brought it up to police when asked or it becomes pertinent. And of the last 5 times I've been stopped, 5 times I've been stopped, it's come up twice.
Yeah.
Because I've been asked.
Yeah. And you know what? This Joe McGill character, you know, why is Nye County, why do they have so many guys with this kind of thing? I mean, this guy's he got in trouble on Metro PD. He
has a history on Metro.
He's a problem case.
Lost rank.
Why the hell does the Nye County Sheriff's Department keep hiring such problem cases out here? We've got Berukowitz, who has a criminal background on the East Coast, and he got hired here. We got a guy running around with a badge and a gun in this town who's a 30% mentally disabled. Why is this department hiring these turds?
It's called a second chance department.
God.
And a lot of times these guys get jammed up. They deserve a second chance, but maybe they should look closer at some of them.
Yeah, well, because you, the public, are paying the price for these guys.
We'll be right back.
All right, we are back, and now it's time for... What is up with all of these corrupt cops? No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. You know, I want to approach this subject delicately because I think it's not something to be so much condemned as it is to find a solution. And it is, what is up with so many people, probably nationwide, but especially here in Nye County, involved with drugs? Now, before I get into my concerns, let me say that I come from Southern California. I grew up in a suburb of LA, kind of an upper middle class environment where the kids had some money. In a time in the 70s when the expression just say no hadn't even been created yet. And if you asked a lot of parents at that point, you know, should your kid do drugs? They'd be like, well, I don't know, because they were doing a lot of drugs. So I say that to make the point that I am not pristine, and I did my experimentation when I was a boy, a young man, and decided enough of that, and I joined the military, and off we went, and I've never done drugs since then. But it seems that I see drugs as being more pervasive in today's society, or perhaps more destructive. And I wonder where that destructive nature comes from. Let me explain that comment. When I was a teenager, myself and my peers and a lot of the social group I hung out with in high school and immediately after high school, we all kind of enjoyed what we euphemistically referred to as, you know, partying, right? Which usually involves some form of recreational drugs. Not good, let me be very clear about that, but it turned out it didn't inhibit any of us from getting on with our lives in the long run. It seems different now, and one of the things that I note in different era, different mindset, I noticed that a lot more people who are involved with drugs today end up in the criminal justice system. And I wonder, I don't have the answers, I wonder whether that is always advantageous. Let me describe what I mean by that. I've talked about, just a moment ago, mentioned that myself, many of my peers, I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the people I went to high school with. By the way, my graduating class was 1,000 students. I went to a big high school, which most people went to high school with a smaller graduating class. But literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of my peers during high school and afterwards did drugs. And almost none of them ended up in the criminal justice system. And they all ended up setting the drugs aside and moving on and being productive with their lives. Funny story, I think I was at my 20-year reunion, and I show up, and I've got short hair, and I had long hair and a beard in high school, okay? I've got short hair and a mustache. I run into a guy who was a big druggie in high school, and he's still got long hair, and he's still like, yo, dude. And, when he found out I was in law enforcement, he's like, no, not you. He was like heartbroken, right? But with the exception of guys like him, everybody just got on with their life. I mean, when I went to the 10-year reunion, there were no drug addicts, even though most everybody had done drugs in high school. 20-year reunion, no drug addicts. 30-year reunion, no drug addicts. But today I notice what happens is young people get involved with drugs, and through the war on drugs, which didn't exist in my day, and through the cops doing this technique where they arrest one guy and they don't bring charges, or they bring lesser charges if they give up 10 of their drug friends, it seems that virtually everybody who touches drugs today ends up in the criminal justice system. And they have then a drug record, and that follows them around for the rest of their life. They're in drug court, they're stigmatized, they can't get a job, especially in a place like Prump. Everybody knows who they are. And I look back to my time in high school doing drugs, my friends doing drugs, so I'm not just using myself as the example, my entire peer group. And because we didn't end up in the system, when it was time to move on, just moved on. There was no stigma. Nobody had a criminal record, and very few people had a criminal record for anything like that. And they moved on, and they got good, responsible jobs, and they raised families, and they owned property, and they owned businesses, and they had a great life, or have a great life. I look at some of my friends who were crazy drug users. They had wonderful lives. They left it behind, and they moved on. In this war on drugs era, and the way the cops handle business today, and everybody's in the criminal justice system, and you will pay for your drug use, I really wonder whether we're actually helping. I mean, the idea of having drugs illegal is, at least in theory, to create a better, healthier society. I'm not saying that I agree that that's what it does. I'm just saying that's, I think, what some people imagine the goal is. I seriously question whether having everybody going through the criminal justice system at 17, 18, 19, 20 is really helping our society. Bill, what do you think about that?
Well, Cheech, I remember back in the day when sex was safe and drugs were dangerous.
Yeah, at least that was the statement. Yeah.
Now it's the other way around. You make some valid points. I mean, I never partook in any kind of drugs. I've never even taken a hit off a joint. Right. Nothing. It just wasn't for me. Now,
you prefer just impersonating a police officer.
Yeah. I drank when I was a kid. I mean, I was actually 17 years old, and there was a particular liquor store in downtown Las Vegas I was able to walk into and buy beer every Friday night if I wanted. And turns out that may have happened a time or two. And, hey, do you have your idea? It's like, you guys see me in here every week. You card me every time I'm in here. Do you need me to go back to my house and get it? Go ahead.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, but, so Mickey's Big Mouth was my drug of choice when I was a kid. Now, some of my peer group, smoked a little bit of weed. One of my friends actually did a little bit of blow. As a matter of fact, this is so funny. Somehow or another, we keep getting back to cops. I knew several cops when I was on Las Vegas Metro. I am no longer a police officer. I resigned in May of '96, yet again. That a number of them did drugs and did some relatively heavier drugs and even some relatively heavier use of drugs, but they were not truthful about that when they applied for the job. And when asked about it on the pre-employment polygraph, made it through that. And a number of them,
I have no idea how that could possibly happen.
I would say there's probably at least 3 or 4 guys, probably 4 guys that I talked to when I was on there, that you know, and a number of them were the guys that went out there and they liked busting people who were for drugs. They liked doing street busts on narcotics, and you know, I would ask them, and I don't want to give out any names, I don't, because a lot of these guys, if not all of them, are still on, and this was a conversation we had, so I'm not going to give any names. That would say, you know, what is your deal with this? And you get in some conversation, you find out that they had done drugs, but their thing is, yeah, but I never got caught. Yeah. So these guys are going to pay. And I mean, there's a lot of statistics out there. Everything's the 80-20 rule, right? They say 80% of all crime is committed by 20% of the criminals, and 80% of all crime is drug or alcohol related, right? Like people are stealing something or whatever to support their drug habit or their alcohol habit. And you hear this 80-20 rule.
I don't buy it, by the way.
Yeah, well, and I'm just saying, that's everybody goes at. You know, 29.7% of all statistics are made up on the spot. 68.4%, I say. So, you never know. But it just, what it does is it stinks that people get jammed up for doing stuff. And it's that, what it comes down to is the government passes laws because they don't want you or you to get high.
Yeah.
Unless they get paid. That's why there's an alcohol tax.
It's kind of weird. I'll tell you an interesting story. I got a DUI when I was 18. Okay? Now, of course, you shouldn't be drinking when you're 18, right? But nevertheless, I got a DUI when I was 18. And this is kind of how the criminal justice system works.
You were barely able to D, and you went out and UI?
That's right. But here's how weird the criminal justice system is, and why I question whether having everybody getting chewed up in it and by it is productive. We're going back when things were nowhere near as bad as far as how drug courts and everything operate.
Did you have a rumble seat in the back of that car?
Pretty much, yeah. We had to unhitch the horses when they arrested me.
You probably had a Volkswagen Transporter.
So the court ordered me to go to a drug and alcohol evaluation before I went through whatever I was going through. So I go to see a drug and alcohol counselor, right? This, I don't know, probably 30-year-old lady. And I'm 18, and I go in there, and I sit down, and she's like, tell me about your drug and alcohol problem. I said, I don't have a drug and
no problem.
Well,
Rehab's for quitters.
I said, I don't have a drug and alcohol problem. I said, I'm 18. I hang out and party with my friends sometimes. I went out and had a couple drinks. I drove. I shouldn't have. I did. I got caught. I don't have a drug and alcohol problem. I went out and partied one night and got caught. Sorry, I wish I could tell you I have a drug and alcohol problem, but I don't. I'm being completely forthright with this lady, right? And she looks at me and she says, so you're in denial. I swear to God. So
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. Her 27 minutes of counseling taught her that.
Oh my God, it was like, okay, so if I said, yes, I have an alcohol problem, she would have been thrilled, okay? But because I was forthright and said I don't have an alcohol problem, all of a sudden I'm in denial. And, you know.
Hi, Dave.
Right, and you can imagine what her report to the court looked like, right? Yeah. Funny story at the end of this. Because her report was so negative and false, the judge orders me to go to all these like alcohol aversion things, right, as part of my probation. So I'm going to the AA meetings, you know what I'm saying? Right, totally ridiculous.
Picking up on the girls.
But I want to get done with this, right? Because I had to do so many. So I want to get done with it. So I'm looking on the list of where I can go and I see, NA, Narcotics Anonymous. So,
ding, 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 ding.
Oh, dude, I go to these meetings. Oh my God, I've never been around people who are like hardcore drug addicts and they're twitching and they're coming in wheelchairs and stuff and I'm like, So I go to
Scared straight?
I go to my probation officer who's about 1,000 years old. He's about 6 seconds from retirement. And I sat down with him and I told him the story. I said, you know what, when I go to these meetings, Do you know what I feel like when I get out of this meeting? I feel like having a drink. So, much to his credit, he was cool. He was like my grandfather, very common sense. He signed me off on all of them right there and then and said, I know you're not that guy, go. But the point is, that says how
That's such a great story.
how crazy the system can be. And
it can.
do we want to put all of our youth through this program?
You know what? It was months ago. I was ranting about the war on this, the war on that, the war on the other thing. It's killing us.
Yeah,
it is.
And we'll be back right after these words.
Welcome back. And with the proper intro this week, let's get to it. That was it. Thanks to the engineer. You know what really grinds my gears? Politicians who lie and deceive, knowing that they're lying and deceiving, leading up to something. This segment is dedicated to an assemblyman that represents my hometown, a guy that I have called a friend and supported. His name is Assemblyman James Oscarson, who represents Assembly District 36 here in Southern Nevada. It's got the vast majority of Nye County, where we live. It takes a bit of, actually a good portion of Lincoln County, which is a large physically county, but population very small, and a portion of northern into eastern part of Clark County, where Las Vegas is, but it doesn't really get much of the city. It gets a little bit of North Las Vegas. And here's my big issue. You never see any politicians running on raising your taxes and hiking up all kinds of things like the cigarette tax is going to go up. I think it's $1.60 or $1.80 soon. There was an 80-cent tax that was coming due soon. They just passed another $1 on top of that. They never run on raising the price of business people to do business by inflating their costs for business licenses. They never run on those sorts of things. But then when they vote for them, when they've actually run on the opposite, that is what grinds my gears. This is exactly what happened with James Oscarson. He'd been telling me for months that he's not going to support higher taxes. Actually put out a statement months ago to a conservative columnist, not a columnist, a conservative activist that has a very wide-reaching email list in Nevada and beyond by the name of Chuck Muth. And James Oscarson released a statement to him that he has no intention of supporting any higher taxes. Now, Chuck called it right. He said, no intention doesn't mean you're not going to do it. Sure enough, we just had the end of the session. June 1st, late at night, 11:59 midnight, was the end of the 4-month session. It won't spark up again until 2 years from now in 2017. And the last couple of days is when they discussed the budget, and James Oscarson from Assembly District 36 voted for every single tax hike that came down the pike in the final bit of the session. Every one of them, totaling, until we get the total math, we're not exactly sure, somewhere around $1.5 billion. Now, what's that mean? For the roughly 2.85 million people in Nevada, that is $525 for every man, woman, and child. Every resident soul in Nevada is what that means. How is it spread across? Smokers will pay a little bit more. Business people will pay a little bit more. And how does it work out? We all end up paying. We all will end up sharing that burden to some degree or another. Every one of us. And Dave, I got to tell you, when I have a politician telling me one thing, and then at the very end, they decide, you know what, forget you. This is what I'm doing. And when we're talking about a representative, in this case, who's a Republican, calls himself a conservative, financial, fiscal conservative Republican, and votes for these taxes, that grinds my gears.
Oh, I get it. And, you know, imagine this. I mean, just to put it in sort of real terms for people, mom and dad, 3 kids, you're pushing $2,700 more a year because he wants to vote yes. Okay, that to me is just obscene. I mean, if I was, you know, back in the days with kids and I was going to be facing almost a $2,700 increase because some sphincter wanted to push the yes button, to me, it's unfathomable and it's impermissible. It cannot be left to stand.
And keep in mind that math works out to a little over $200 a month.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to reference something, and you're probably going to laugh a little bit. I had some words with him when you were present, and the way he conducted himself on that day, just that any man would find it acceptable to conduct himself in a it wasn't a public meeting, but there were several of us there.
It was a business meeting, if you will.
Yes, with what, about 8 people present?
Sure.
To conduct himself that way, disrespectfully, and I had to put him in his place. Right at that moment, you right or wrong, you've learned certain red flags go up when you see people do things.
Sure.
Okay. When he did that, right there, the red flag came up for me that he thinks he can do whatever he wants. That was the moment when I realized James Oscarson thinks he can do whatever he wants. And here we have it.
And I saw that in your eyes. Now, here's the thing that really, really, really stinks. There's the completely ugly, stinking pile of truth with flies buzzing around is that we had, for the first time in, I think it was 87 years, the first time we had both houses of the state legislature and the governor all Republican. Last time was, I think, 1929 was the last time this happened. So literally, once in a lifetime, once in more than a lifetime, considering.
For most people, right, yeah.
As a matter of fact, we have a member of our Central Committee who's 96, 97 years old. He was the only one in our Central Committee who was alive then.
Okay.
So, but still not yet of voting age. So, this is the first time that happened. Now, in the way that it works in Nevada legislatures, you have to have a 2/3 majority of the legislators in the Senate and a 2/3 majority of the legislators in the Assembly to approve any sort of a tax increase. Now, who proposed these massive taxes? Our Republican governor, who didn't run on raising higher taxes. Not at all.
Sendable.
And they don't call them tax hikes. They call them investments for our future. They call it the new Nevada.
Whoa. Investment for our future. You know where that language comes from, right?
Oh, of course I do.
It comes from the Democrats 20 years ago.
Oh, it comes from, what was it? What is that damn book on how to be a commie that everybody always references?
By Bill Ayers.
Yes, Bill Ayers' book.
I can't remember the title of it, but
anyhow, it'll come to me. Rules for Radicals.
Yes.
Rules for Radicals. Comes out of that. I mean, this is like communist manifesto sort of stuff.
I remember in California 20, 25 years ago, every time the Democrats wanted to raise taxes, it was an investment in X, an investment in Y.
And this, on top of that, here's the other, it was all for the children. It was for the education. Now, keep in mind, it was 12 years ago under former Governor Kenny Gwynn, who's now passed away. When he entered his second term, he did the exact same thing, said, I will release my budget after the election. And at that time, that was the highest tax hike in the history of Nevada. No. Brian Sandoval just did the same thing and way outdid the last one. Now, and that was supposed to be to increase funding to education to lift it up because Nevada is dead last statistically in education.
Yeah. And so, by the way, I get a lot of teachers talking to me because they know I do the show and they want to give me, and they tell me about how things work and what they have to deal with. It's like, I need to sharpen this pencil, but I need to check with the assistant principal to make sure that I understand the policies of the school district about sharpening pencils so I don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
What is going on? It's not that the schools are not properly funded. It's that they are moving like molasses because of all these policies and rules and regulations.
Yeah, and they're not using the funding properly.
Yes,
this whole thing for the children, I got to tell you, when they raised all those taxes 12 years ago, that was supposed to be for the children. Now, keep in mind, the kids that just graduated started their school careers in first grade with that new funding, right? They also finished dead last. Their entire school careers, from first grade through graduation, they all went through that funding, and they're still dead last every year.
So the message is the money didn't make the difference.
No, and there's
something else has to make the difference.
Every single time that you look throughout history that any state, locality, nation, whatever, has raised taxes and spent more on education, just thrown money at education.
Right.
There has never, ever in history been a measurable difference, ever. And one of the big things they want to do here, which this is a union thing, right, is they want smaller class sizes. In order to have smaller class sizes, you have to hire more union construction guys to build more schools. You have to hire more people who will all join the union, who all pay union dues. So all that money, it doesn't go into the classroom to help teach the students at all. It helps to spread them thinner. It helps to hire more people. It helps to empower a stronger union. That's all it does. No. That's all it's ever done.
The statistics show that it doesn't improve education.
Ever. It's never.
And the voters, because what this is, it plays upon the heartstrings of the voters, because most voters have children. Okay. Oh, I want the best for our kids. A laudable motive, right? Okay. I want the best for our kids. Yes. And because voters don't inform themselves anymore, they don't understand that more money absolutely does not translate into anything better for the kids.
Okay, and interesting you bring that up, because there was a ballot question on the last general election ballot this last November. Should we institute a margins tax on gross receipts for sales for businesses in Nevada?
Right.
And the answer was overwhelmingly no. Nearly 80%, 79% of the people who voted said no. What there is now is essentially gross receipts tax 2.0. It's not as bad as the governor initially put in. They raised taxes in other areas to offset it. But what it is they're going to charge you different rates for your business license every year based on your gross receipts, not your net, but your gross. If you have a thin margin and you're selling $3 million a year and maybe you made a profit of a couple $100,000 at 1% margin, or actually it'd be a 10% margin, you might be able to afford the higher business license.
And keep in mind, every time the government charges business more, whether it's for tax or licensing, the business passes it on to you.
Yep.
So it's not a tax on the business, it's a tax on you because they pass it on to you.
Precisely why we are all going to collectively pay, it's $526 and change, based on the numbers. We'll all pay
per man, woman, and every child.
Yeah. Count the number of people in your household times 525.
Yeah. So what's going on with James? What's the plan?
Well, I seriously question if he would ever even consider rerunning, because you have to keep in mind, Assembly District 36 is the most conservative district in the entire state, and he hosed us bad. I kind of doubt that he will actually run again. If he does, it'll be an embarrassment, and there's already a massive statewide coordinated effort to replace him and the rest of the backstabbing Republicans that voted for this.
You know, we're down to less than 30 seconds, so I'm sure you can't speak to this, but I will tell you that just on a personal, we've not talked about this, just on a personal basis, knowing how politics works, I am curious to know who and what caused James Oscarson to turn his back on the very people who put him in office.
Time will tell. If he gets a job or a position or something somewhere, time will tell.
But he valued that more than he valued you.
We'll be right back.
We're unprepared to talk to you.
We are totally unprepared. You have no idea how true the name of this show really is.
Yeah, if you only knew.
If you only knew.
All right, so again, this is the segment where we talk about the things that interest you. And so we're going to talk about...
Send in your emails to us.
Yeah, right there, don't be shy. Let's talk about the presidential contenders for 2016.
The pool of presidential candidates?
Yes, on both sides of the aisle. And the reason that I think the audience, this is a pertinent issue to the audience, is probably like me, you look at the news every single day in one format or another. I do it professionally speaking. I go through and look at articles for the Dave Champion Show and so forth every day of the week, various news sites. And inevitably, for months now. And
that's how you came across the Dunger story last week. Right?
And I'm also on some email lists where I get, it's like you go to the enemy's site and you say, send me emails. But every single day, the headlines on virtually every single news source is about Hillary or Bush, Jeb, or Cruz, or who's the guy, O'Malley, the Democrat that's supposed to be...
the Democrat socialist, as he calls himself.
Right.
Which is just commie. I mean, it's just...
Yeah. So, and the list goes on and on. I mean, what the Republican field is, what, 12 deep, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
And my view is this, and I don't know how to say it any more diplomatic than this. And by the way, some very wealthy donors have made this same observation, so this isn't just Dave Champion sitting here in Pahrump saying this. There's nobody good. There's nobody that you look at, for me, there's nobody that I look at and say, that guy, yeah. It's like, I look at the entire field across the spectrum, Republican, Democrats, Independents, and so forth, and it's like, Jesus, this is what we've got?
Well, we might have a sleeper that could just surprise everybody and get in there. Very, very popular right now. Mm-hmm. Very popular, conservative, registered Republican.
All right, I'm listening.
That, a lot of people are really paying attention to right now that nobody's really considering might throw their name in there.
But I will decline if nominated.
No, that hasn't come up. Okay. Hasn't come up. Caitlyn Jenner.
Who the hell? Oh.
The Caitlyn formerly known as Bruce Jenner.
That took me a second. I just had to go, woo.
What?
Yeah. It's just, you've got Hillary, okay, who has...
Who's in the news every day, one controversy after another controversy. And of course, the Democrats, they don't care. They don't care. You could talk about Hillary having done unspeakable atrocities to children in third world nations, and the Democrats don't care.
No. And she has so much baggage. And
not just the ones under her eyes.
And polls show that Americans overwhelmingly do not trust her.
The Polish don't?
The Polish, yes, exactly.
The
Polish American population does not trust her. And then you've got, we switch to the right side, and you've got people like Ted Cruz. Okay, now I have some problems with him because of who he's married to, and his wife is high up in the Council on Foreign Relations, and who's a big investment firm. I'm having a senior moment.
I don't know.
The one that was responsible for all the nonsense.
AIG?
No. Anyway,
I don't know.
Having a senior moment. But on top of that, he just comes out at CPAC, which was several weeks ago, and he says that Americans, in order to have better health in America, Americans have to pray because God will grant the faithful good health, and he condemns sinners with illness. It's like, you are a candidate for president, and you just said one of the most asinine things I've ever heard in my life. Like Christians and Jews and Muslims, they're all religious people. It's all the Abrahamic faith, right? Like they don't get cancer? I mean,
Dave,
Jesus.
I have gone to standard physicians, I've gone to nutritional doctors, and I got to tell you, I've never been written a prescription for prayer.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm healthy, and I don't need a prescription for prayer, but I've never been given a prescription for prayer.
So Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
Sanders? Okay. Independent, Vermont, I think?
He's not independent. He's a Democrat socialist, admitted.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, but I think he's an interesting spoiler. Because, when I look at the Democrats, okay, the standard...
By the way, Bernie Sanders blamed deaths blamed Republicans for deaths at Benghazi today.
Oh, that's
the news. Yeah.
Believe me, none of these guys are
how together this guy is.
I'm not saying Bernie Sanders should be president. I'm not supporting Bernie Sanders. I'm saying he's a spoiler. The Dems, of course, they've got their dog and pony show, which is typically, more and more entitlements. Okay. You've got the Republicans. It seems going into 2016, their big pitch is more religion and more killing all over the planet. Okay, the empire building. And then you've got Bernie Sanders, who seems to be cutting the middle. He says quite a few socialist things. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Things that I listen to, and I'm like, okay, it sounds good to an uninformed and ill-informed and non-thinking electorate.
Which is unfortunately the case.
Right. But I'm going to guess it's almost like a Perot thing. Remember Ross Perot?
Sure, yeah.
It's almost like I can see Bernie Sanders pulling some votes from both sides because he seems to be cutting that. I mean, for those Republicans who do not believe, I'm not talking about the politicians, I'm talking about the citizens, who do not believe we should be empire building and killing people all over the planet, but can't vote Democrat. They can't vote Hillary. Bernie Sanders seems like an alternative. For the Democrat side who thinks the Democrats are out of control, Bernie Sanders steps a little bit away from them and seems appealing perhaps to some of them. So this is but I look at it and it's all bullshit. There's nothing good going on. There's nobody telling the truth. It's like, where the hell are we as a nation?
You know, Hillary is not going to be scandal-ridden out of the office. She's not. However, you give an alternate to the Democrats, because that doesn't mean that she's liked either. Just because the scandals aren't, they're going to bounce off her. She's the Teflon Don of that. Most Democrats are, especially a female Democrat. Imagine if Hillary Clinton were also black. Then there has to be nothing ever could possibly touch her. But just because she's a Democrat, she's all Teflon. Most of the news agencies don't care. The voters don't really care. But again, that doesn't mean that Democrats like her. So if you get somebody like a Bernie Sanders, somebody else announced recently on the Democrats, that gives more options. What it's going to come down to, she's really going to have a primary. If the others can actually, the other Democrat candidates can raise some funds so that they can debate, then Hillary's going to have to spend some money. But you know, she's got billions now thanks to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I have a different point of view. I think she's DOA. Okay, I think as a presidential candidate, she's DOA. I think any money that gets spent by her right now is getting flushed down the toilet. I think there is, we'll find out who's right. Time will tell. I think there's zero chance that she's going to end up as a Democratic nominee.
I would hope not.
Because I think the Democratic Party looks at all her baggage and says, if we're going to spend billions on this race, we're not going to back a loser.
But the thing is, I don't know if they would do that because, you know, the Kennedys were really a foundation, a staple of this country for decades. And the Clintons now have been for the last nearly 25 years. Mm-hmm. So I still think that just the name and that Democrats will vote. The only thing Democrats, they won't vote for Republicans. What they'll do is they'll stay home, which is what happened in 2014 that got on the red wave across America. Was not so much that the Republicans won in such huge landslides, it's that the Democrats couldn't support Obama. The Democrats couldn't support a lot of the other garbage candidates that were out there, so they stayed home.
Speaking of Obama, which immediately summons up for me Obamacare, okay? You remember the sticker shock when Obamacare went into effect and most people's health insurance went through the roof. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen the news article. The insurance companies are pushing for an increase for 2016. Many of them are talking about a 50% increase over the obscene increases that went into effect when Obama. So what affordable health care insurance? It seems whenever the government names something like that, the Affordable Health Care, the USA,
look
USA
in the mirror.
Freedom Act.
Yeah, look in the mirror.
Yeah,
that's the opposite.
Just do the antonym. And you've got it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know, I have to tell you an interesting story. Now, I chair the county Republican Party, which is the only reason that my arrest has made any kind of news at all. I got a call at 7:30 in the morning yesterday from the Associated Press, and I called the reporter back about a half hour later. I said, look, if I wasn't chairing the county Republican Party, would you care at all about this? And she said no. I said, all right. So here's the deal. The news story is not that I got arrested. The news story is that a cop didn't like me and he jammed me up. And he's going to falsify information to put me in jail because that's his way of ending the debate and saying, I won. That's his way of doing that for the day. So that's the real story. This happens thousands of times a day across the country, and Americans tolerate it. That's the problem. We need to fix it. Anyhow, I also sit on the state Central Committee. I'm a member of state by nature of being the county chair, and I was part of the state nominating committee for the first time ever in recent years. The state Central Committee, the state party, interviewed a whole bunch of candidates for statewide office. We had recommendations on who to endorse and to put that out to the public to try to get them to win. And with the exception of two, everybody that we recommended for endorsement voted against this massive tax hike.
Oh, okay.
2 voted for it. Everybody who voted against it was part of the suggested endorsement list. And everybody that we suggested we endorse was on there with the exception of 2. That was Paul Anderson that voted for it, who was the majority leader, and the guy that was the Speaker of the House too, John Hambrick. He actually signed a taxpayer, the taxpayer protection pledge or whatever it's called, saying I won't raise taxes. So anyhow, we're hoping to expand this. And then did. We're hoping to expand this. It was a first-time run through, and we did really good. Now we know how to critique it and tweak it a little bit so we can avoid this kind of thing in the future. And
so we need to take your model to the national level.
We would hope so.
Because what we're seeing now, it's clearly not working.
We would hope so. And in fact, I am hoping that we can get some support to do just that so that we don't have these rhinos Republican in name only. We need to go on a rhino hunt.
Especially
a safari.
And at the national level as well.
Yeah.
My friends, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.